Hello, everybody, and welcome to the JL Fit Life podcast, episode 2. I'm your host, Jacqui Labadia, and I am the owner of JL Fitness and Lifestyle. For short form, we kind of call it JL Fit Life. And I'm here, October 17th, 2024, and we're here and we're going to be talking today about hormones and cycle syncing and specifically cortisol because I get a lot of questions about that. And I do think that there are a few different misconceptions that we need to unpack about cortisol and kind of what is marketed and what is talked about. Really, really interesting stuff. Firstly, I'm just going to give you like a little life update because this week has been a week and I think a lot of women, especially moms, can relate to this because we just go through these phases where it feels like everything like hits you at once. And I'm having one of those weeks. We started off with my son getting sick and he sleeps in the same bed as my husband and I. So if he was not sleeping well, so therefore we were not sleeping well. And that was really rough. Then we woke up on Tuesday morning we had just carved our pumpkins with our kids over the weekend and our pumpkins got smashed. These 3 teenagers, we caught them on camera, came around our entire neighborhood and were smashing pumpkins at like 2:00 in the morning. And that's what we woke up to. And it was so sad. And it was so disappointing because it's not about the pumpkins. It's about the kids behind those pumpkins. And if you have little kids, I'm sure just like my son who's 4, he's so excited about Halloween. And this was the first time that like he really kind of participated in pumpkins carving somewhat. He kind of thought that the pumpkin guts were like gross and stuff like that, but we carved them out with like Jack Skellington was one of them, and then Oogie Boogie was the other one because my son is like obsessed with The Nightmare Before Christmas this year. So he loved them and he was so excited. And then to wake up and have these pumpkins that we worked so hard on, like as a family, like completely smashed was just heartbreaking. But then on the other end of it, at the end of the day, I got this message from my neighbor saying that somebody was coming around delivering pumpkins to try to replace the ones that got smashed. And it was so nice. I got that message and it like made me tear up because I was like, wow, that is just incredible. Somebody being a good Samaritan and trying to like undo those wrongs and, be there for the kids and stuff like that. So that was also kind of a really nice learning lesson as a parent to like discuss with my 4-year-old and just kind of pointing out that like, yes, these people came around smashing pumpkins, did something really bad and really mean, but there was somebody else who came and kind of rectified it and did like the good thing. And so it was a really nice teaching moment, I think, for my son to really see that. So to that gentleman who had done that, thank you so much because I think that means more to most people than I think can be said, even though it's just like such a simple thing. But so we had that, and then that day too, my eye was starting to bother me, and as you can see, if you're watching me on video, I have like a swollen eyelid, and I do think it might be a sty. That's what a few people have been telling me. My entire eyelid is just swollen, so I kind of was thinking it was an allergic reaction. And if you know me, and if you've been following me for a while, you know that I have had bad experiences with adhesives. I used to love getting eyelash extensions, and then all of a sudden one day, like they just started really bothering my eyes, and my eyes would swell up exactly like this, but it would be both of them, obviously. So I have that history and that experience, and I just started using a new mascara like at the beginning of September, and I was kind of afraid that maybe this was like a delayed allergic reaction to that, but it's just on one eye. So I'm hoping it is a sty and just some kind of fluke, because that would be my luck, is I find a mascara that I actually like really love and I have a freaking allergic reaction to it. So anyways, I know this sounds like super stupid, but if you're watching me and wondering what the fuck is going on with my face, that is what is happening. But we're showing up anyways. This is still a one-take show. We're still showing up here authentically, and it is what it is. Okay, my eye is swollen. Yeah, and then just like a number of other different things going on this week. So it's just been kind of overwhelming. But I posted on my stories this morning because I decided to take a little nature walk after I dropped my kids off at preschool. And it was just so needed. And my kids' preschool is like right. So we live in a town that is built around like a river, and my kids' preschool is right by the river. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go take a like just half-hour walk to myself, get out in nature, because I'm really feeling the weight of all of these things on me right now. And it's just a good reminder that, especially as a mother, when you are at everyone else's beck and call, and there's these times in life when you're pulled every which way, but you're also not at your full capacity, and you're also dealing with like things that are happening to you, it's so much harder to show up for everybody else. And in that respect, I think what happens a lot is we still end up putting ourselves on the back burner in order to take care of everyone else's needs and just be like, okay, I'll take care of myself later. But I think it's kind of backwards. Like, I think we need to take it the other way and be like, you know what? There are certain things that can wait, but I can't. And I need to take some time to myself to like recuperate and fuel myself and, take a mental and emotional break from all of these things, because I'm feeling myself getting overwhelmed. And if I continue down this path, I'm going to be burnt out, and then I'm going to be no good to anybody. So I think it's a good reminder to be like that, having that mindset shift in perspective and reminding yourself that, especially during those harder times, that is when it's really important to take that time for yourself to take care of your own needs, so that you can, by extension, take care of everybody else. And like, as I said in my Instagram stories, it takes practice to think that way, because I think a lot of us have spent our entire lives people pleasing and being made to feel like we need to not be selfish and not think about ourselves, and that you're put on a pedestal if you are doing everything else for everybody else. And it's just not true. Like, you can't live your entire life serving other people without taking care of your own needs first. You have to fill your own cup in order to pour into everybody else's. So this is just that reminder. And that's why I wanted to share this, because I have many moms who follow me and look to me for advice. And this is what I have to do in order to make sure that I am filling my own cup, in order to not just be a mom, but be a good coach and be a good recreation therapist and all of these, be a good like granddaughter and daughter, and fill up wherever I need to be in order to help other people, which I do get purpose from. But I can only get so much purpose from it as long as I'm not resentful towards it. And I feel like that resentment can come when it starts to really take away from my own well-being and my own sense of, my own well-being. If it's starting to like really like wear on me, then it's not going to be so purposeful, right? So anyways, that being said, I did get some questions about cortisol specifically. So I know that's, sorry, like hard turn there in my conversation. So I did today want to kind of allot this episode to specifically hormones, with a really big emphasis on cortisol. And then I also wanted to talk about cycle syncing and what that is, and like benefits and purposes and stuff like that too. So again, like, because I have a lot of women following me and a lot of people falling under this category, I do think it's really important to unpack a lot of these different things that are marketed towards us. And that being said, I do think the very first thing that we should always keep in mind when it comes to marketing, especially in the fitness industry, and I mean especially anywhere, but marketing in the fitness industry, it's something to kind of develop an eye for, in terms of like what is worthwhile and what is not. The fitness industry, especially when it comes to making money, they love to thrive on fear. And there's been a lot of that around the last few years, this fear mongering, whether it's on one side or the other. So, for example, like seed oils is one that comes to mind for me, about like how bad they are for you and all of these things. But also, is cutting out seed oils completely something that's realistic for everybody? And I'm going to say no. So when we're having seed oils in moderation, and we are fueling ourselves mostly with whole foods and mostly with plants and meats and things like that, you're automatically going to cut out a lot of different seed oils, because seed oils are usually found in like very highly processed foods. However, having highly processed foods every once in a while, as long as it doesn't make up the majority of your diet, is completely okay. It's not going to cause harm to you if it's happening once in a while. So it's that fear and that like how it's addressed, that I think is the part that really bothers me in terms of like how we market these different things. So pay attention to how somebody presents this information, because usually at the end of it, especially if you're on social media and stuff like that, and you're following certain people and they're going on and on and on about how bad different things are, usually at the end of that, there's some sort of pitch. There's some sort of thing in there that they're trying to sell you. So just be aware that this is usually how things go. And the same goes for cortisol. If you're hearing about people kind of fear-mongering about cortisol, which is a hormone, by the way, and which is not something we can get rid of, and it actually has many different benefits and purposes, which I'm going to get into, it's the same kind of thing. So really watch out for that in terms of like what you're seeing on social media and things like that. Is like, what are people trying to sell you if they're trying to tell you that something really specific is quote unquote bad for you? Even yesterday, I guess it wasn't a sell, but I did see like it was a clip of a podcast with somebody else that I actually really admire. But the person that they were interviewing was going on about how sitting is bad for you. And, she talks about like, there's this, all this research about how the people who sit more, are more likely to develop like all of these diseases and like all cause death and things like that. And she's like, so that's how bad sitting is for you. So the thing was like that really bothered me with that was like the act of sitting itself is not bad for you. Like, so like, let's make that discretion, having a sedentary lifestyle, which yes, involves more sitting, that is what is like correlated to the people who are going to have a higher likelihood of more disease, more illness, earlier deaths, and things like that. There's a very big difference between the act of sitting and a sedentary lifestyle. So when somebody says sitting is bad for you, to me, that's them telling you that like you should never sit. You should never be sitting. You should always be moving. But there's a big difference between, again, like a sedentary lifestyle and sitting to rest, because rest is just as important as exercise is too, right? So let's make that discretion or like that differentiation between the two, because there's a very, very big difference between telling somebody that sitting is bad for you or telling somebody that, hey, movement is really good, and having a sedentary lifestyle and paying attention to how much you're sitting is very different. So always try to like pay attention to those contexts and understand that there is a difference when somebody is telling you something specific. So I think that just in general, that's just like good knowledge to have and to understand when you're scrolling on Instagram or scrolling on Facebook and you come across these things that are like, don't do that, this is bad for you, and blah, 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 blah. There's usually a lot more context to it. There's usually a lot more of a moderated kind of approach, and something that is also going to be more sustainable and more realistic to like changing your lifestyle. So that being said, cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone in our bodies. And just like any hormone, so think like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, insulin, cortisol, like all of these hormones play different roles within our body. All of these hormones, so there's also that whole approach where it's like balance your hormones and blah, blah, blah. There's no such thing as really balancing your hormones, okay? You're never going to have like the same level of all of your hormones. That's not how it works. All of your hormones are constantly going up and down throughout the day, throughout the day, depending on the time of day, depending on where you are in your cycle, depending on lifestyle factors that are impacting your body. Your hormones are going to respond to your day-to-day life and your day-to-day activities. And as a woman who's in like a menstruating woman, your hormones also go up and down depending on like where you are in your cycle. Okay? So that being said, cortisol specifically is a hormone that helps you with stress responses, okay? So if you exercise, for example, that is actually stress on the body. It's good stress, but it's stress nonetheless. So after you exercise, your cortisol is going to go up. And this is something that I had a friend actually recently ask me, like, she said, somebody like said, you don't want to exercise too hard because it makes your cortisol spike. And it's like, well, yeah, because that's its job. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's just that that's what happens. And that's your body doing its job. That's your body doing its thing because it's responding appropriately. And same goes with like insulin too, right? If you have a higher sugar meal or snack or something like that, your insulin is going to go up because it's doing its job. It's regulating the blood sugar level within your body. So it's not a bad thing. It's just your body doing its job. So there's more context to these claims than you might know. It's just that the marketing companies usually like to hone in on this one thing and make it sellable, make it into something that it's going to sell. So what does cortisol do? Let's talk about that, because cortisol plays many different roles in our bodies. It has many different benefits, and it's not like it's part of a system in our body that allows us to live and it allows us to thrive. So cortisol, first and foremost, is the one thing that most people kind of relate it to is regulating the stress response in your body. The other thing that it does is it increases your metabolism of glucose. So it basically takes the sugar from your bloodstream and it metabolizes it to use it as energy. It helps with controlling your blood pressure. It helps to reduce inflammation, and it also plays a role in coordinating your sleep cycles. So when it comes down to your circadian rhythm, so if you don't know what that is like your sleep cycle. Your circadian rhythm is something that happens throughout 24 hours. So there's a point where your body gets an indicator to wake up, and that is actually when cortisol is at its highest in the day. So when cortisol is high in the day, that's telling you to wake up. So that feeling of you waking up in the morning, if you allow your body to sleep until it kind of naturally wakes up, that's your cortisol kind of peaking for the day, because that's telling you to go up, to wake up. And then as the day goes on, your cortisol kind of lowers, and when it's at its lowest point is usually also where melatonin kicks in, and that's that indication telling your body that it's time to go to sleep. So when that's disrupted, okay, I'm going to stop at that for a second, just because I don't want to confuse myself in what I'm talking about. So when it comes to stress responses, yes, your cortisol is going to kind of come up like after exercise, when we have bouts of anxiety, and things like that. That absolutely makes your cortisol kind of go up. What we don't want is we don't want your cortisol to be chronically high. It's just like insulin, just like blood sugar, just like thyroidism and things like that. You don't want, even though all of these hormones play a role, you don't want it to be chronically high, because that's when we're going to run into some issues. This is where a lot of people think that having a high cortisol level causes weight gain. And it's not as simple as that. So this is where we want to also remember that there's a difference between causation and correlation. Having a high level of cortisol does not cause weight gain, but it is correlated with weight gain. So there is a difference. So before I go into all of these things, I am talking about the general population. So if you have any kind of hormonal dysfunction, this may or may not apply to you, but in terms of the general population of people who are unnecessarily worried about cortisol, this applies to you. We all go through times when we're probably going to have high cortisol, because we all go through stressors, we all go through challenges in life, we all go through phases that might be more stressful than others. What happens when we have high cortisol, especially when it's chronic, so what I mean by chronic is that it's going on for a long time, that's when we're going to run into issues. And it's not that high cortisol is causing your weight gain, it's that it is changing your behaviors when it comes to weight loss or weight management. So what I mean by that, if you think about our ancestors, so cavemen kind of times, there was a time when high cortisol meant you were getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger. That kind of stress, right? So what cortisol does when it's high is it puts us into a state of fight or flight mode. When we are in a state of fight or flight mode, there are other systems that are going to be less prioritized by your body. So this is our body's way of keeping us alive, right? That is our body's sole purpose. That is our brain's sole purpose. Everything that our body does is to keep us alive. And when it starts doing kind of funny things, it's usually because something is indicating to your body that it is stressed out or it is in danger or something to that effect. Your body is constantly adapting to your environment, to how you treat it, to your behaviors, and all of those things. So the thing that we have to understand is that when we were initially programmed to go into fight or flight mode, that was because we were like literally becoming prey to something else. Nowadays, in modern society, our type of stressors are very different from our ancestors, right? But our body doesn't know that. Our body doesn't know that having financial stress right now in modern times is very different from being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So even though it's not something that is imminently going to kill us, it's still stressful because it's impacting our day-to-day life. But our body doesn't know the difference. So if you're going to have high cortisol levels because you're really stressed out about money, or you're having a challenging time at home, or you're stressed out about work, whatever it is, our body doesn't know the difference. It's going to keep us in that fight or flight mode because that stress is unmanaged. And that is when we kind of run into issues if we don't like by nature kind of lower that stress or find ways to get that cortisol level down and to manage that like internal state of fight or flight mode. If you think about fight or flight being in effect, so your cortisol is a high, fight or flight has been like turned on. Things like your digestion, your immune system, your circadian rhythm, all of those things are impacted by that fight or flight mode. So the one thing that people think one thing is that people think that high cortisol just kind of happens. It doesn't just happen on its own. There are things that are influencing you that are causing you to have high levels of cortisol. And a lot of that comes down to unmanaged stress. So whether that is like just internal stress, like having high anxiety, and things like that, it's going to snowball into all of these other things. You're going to find that you're not going to be sleeping very well. You're going to have either short amounts of sleep or like difficulty falling asleep, or like waking up early or anything like that. That's something that's going to happen. You might find that your digestion is off. You might find that you're getting sick a lot, and it's because you're in that fight or flight mode and your body has not been prioritizing those other systems. And that's because in your body, like the way your body's responding is that we are in danger. We're getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So therefore, none of these other systems really matter anymore because we need to like survive and be on all the time in order to survive that saber-toothed tiger. Right? So it's that's how your body is keeping you alive. And so it's something to keep in mind when it comes to what your lifestyle looks like. It's not that you need a cortisol drink, which, by the way, I had to look up what the heck that was. And somebody had asked me, like, do I need cortisol drinks? And the answer is no. So if you want to know what a cortisol drink is, I had to look it up. And apparently it's usually some kind of citrus juice, coconut water. This one had cream of tartar that I looked at, and salt. And yeah, the answer is no, that's not going to fix your cortisol levels. It might be really nutritious in terms of like giving you vitamins and minerals and stuff and like that, which would be helpful in supporting your body in a way that will be more resilient to high cortisol, but it is not going to lower your cortisol levels. So again, going back into like the marketing aspect of it, the fitness industry is going to like focus in on this cortisol and make you afraid of having high cortisol levels, and will also sell you a product that is going to quote unquote fix your cortisol so that you can lose weight, right? So that's usually what's going to be happening, is this whole thing about, okay, cortisol causes weight gain, which it doesn't. It can lead to weight gain. So if you're having trouble losing weight, your cortisol is probably really high, and so you need this drink to help yourself lose weight. No. The majority of people who have high cortisol levels have unmanaged stress. they're going to probably likely have digestive issues. They're likely going to have sleep disturbances. They're likely also people who might be constantly scrolling on their phone and not getting, not prioritizing their sleep. In addition to not getting high quality of sleep, they might have high levels of anxiety, maybe unmanaged depression, and probably lacking movement and poor nutrition. So if I were anybody and I were going to give anyone advice about managing cortisol, that is where I would be starting. So if you have high cortisol levels and you're having trouble sleeping, okay, what are we doing throughout the week to help to manage this stress? Are you allotting time to move? Are you allotting time to make sure you're getting high quality nutrition? Are you allotting time to manage your anxiety and depression? Things like that. But the thing is, this is where it can kind of get tricky, is that if you have high cortisol levels and you're not sleeping well, it makes it that much harder to do all of these things because you don't have the amount of energy that is required that would make these things easy, right? So think of it this way. You have high cortisol level, you're in that fight or flight mode, you're not sleeping well, but also you're in that fight or flight mode, which means that your body is using more energy than it usually needs. It's also metabolizing that glucose in your blood system, which comes from carbs and like other food sources. So you're probably more hungry than usual. You're probably having more sugar cravings than usual. You're probably having more carb cravings than usual. And therefore, you're probably not able to keep yourself in a calorie deficit. So if you're someone who is having trouble losing weight, but you are stressed out and like chronically stressed out and not managing it properly, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to actually stay in a calorie deficit, which is necessary to lose weight. So that is why high cortisol levels can lead to weight gain, because you're probably eating more than you think that you're eating. You're probably moving less than you think you're moving because you're more tired, you're more fatigued. So you're probably not moving as much, right? You're probably a lot more sedentary than you think that you are. So managing all of these things is what's going to help to not only bring your cortisol levels down, but also to ensure that you're actually going to be in a calorie deficit. And it's not to say that if you're stressed out or you're not sleeping well that you can't lose weight. You absolutely can. It's absolutely possible. It's just going to be like hard as fuck. It's going to be so much harder when you're stressed out. And again, like, I don't want to discourage anyone. Like, if you're a highly stressed person or anything like that, or maybe you're a new mom and not sleeping well, it's not that it's not impossible. It's just that it's going to be harder. So if you can wrap your head around that aspect of it and be okay with that, or wait until prioritize managing the stress and sleep first before chasing a calorie deficit and fat loss, that actually might be to your greater benefit and also better for your well-being as well. So at JL Fit Life, when I work with clients, we don't just do the hard and fast fat loss. It's always there might be a time and a place for it for sure, but we want to make sure that other aspects of our well-being are managed first, and that we are in a good place of well-being before pursuing fat loss, or at least like still chasing those aspects of well-being while being in like a moderate calorie deficit. So where a lot of people think that they need to cut down like calories significantly in order to lose weight, we actually focus on being in a calorie deficit, but eating as much as possible while staying in a calorie deficit. So you're not completely starving. You're able to sustain it for a long period of time and therefore be able to sustain the results from it. And you're also not going to kill other aspects of your well-being. You're also going to still be able to enjoy a lot of the different foods that you enjoy. And therefore, if you're able to sustain it and not go off and go like binge eating on every weekend, then you're going to have better results. It's going to take more time for sure, but if you're in it for the long haul, which you should be, you have all the time in the world to chase those fat loss goals, right? Because first and foremost, we're putting forth our well-being. We're making sure we're doing things for ourselves that are managing our stress. We're doing things for ourselves that are managing our sleep, which, by the way, when your sleep is managed and you are getting great amounts of like really good night's sleep, it makes an incredible difference in your ability to show up during the day. And I'm going to say that for these moms too. So for the moms that are out there that are giving up good quality of sleep or a good amount of time of sleep to doom scroll every night, that is probably why you feel like you need more time to yourself. And this might be an unpopular opinion. Like, I'm not saying that moms don't need breaks. We absolutely do. But you're going to have way more patience with your kids if you're actually getting the sleep that you need. So I almost kind of think that by going to bed early and making sure that you are getting good quality of sleep, that might be the like missing puzzle piece that you need when it comes to like time to yourself, is actually getting a good night's sleep so that you then have the necessary energy for your kids the next day. And not only that, but like more patience, less mood swings, less irritability, and then more energy to keep moving your body, which then will cycle through and snowball into more energy, like better moods and all of that stuff. So sleep is like one of those more like overlooked things, because yes, we can show up tired, and yes, we can still do things when we don't have a good amount of sleep. But when you're not sleeping well, everything is just that much harder. So make it easier on yourself and manage your stress and manage your sleep. And then you don't have to worry about, high cortisol levels or anything like that. I also had a question about the use of supplements in order to bring down high cortisol levels. So something like ashwagandha is usually helpful for things like anxiety and things like that. And it's not that I don't think that those wouldn't be helpful. I actually think that they are helpful. But the thing with supplements is that we don't want to rely on supplements either. Like, we don't want to go to supplements first and foremost. What we want to do first is make sure that all of your lifestyle factors are in alignment in order to help reduce high cortisol levels before looking at supplements. But something like ashwagandha could definitely be something that can be helpful, especially initially, to kind of keep things going. So like, it's not that ashwagandha would fix high cortisol levels and therefore allow you to lose weight, but it would be a really great aid when it comes to the focus of managing stress and getting into a really good sleeping pattern. So that's where I think that would be something that would be really beneficial. So that was just another question that came up that I just wanted to address as well. And then, of course, there's that other side of it, like that whole scare factor about exercise and cortisol. So this idea that I shouldn't be exercising, or I shouldn't be exercising at an intense level, otherwise it's going to spike my cortisol. Now, there is like a population of people, and I think it's very, very small, where you find somebody that has high cortisol levels and is exercising, is eating in a calorie deficit, and all of those things. Usually these people, though, are like those people that are like super, super intense about everything. They're like chronically under eating, but chronically over exercising, which is really hard to do, by the way. But also like super type A, like doesn't let up on themselves, doesn't allow themselves to recover properly, and therefore like are constantly sore. They might have, these are the people that probably have really bad digestive issues. And like really high anxiety, that's just, and they're just kind of like go, but not actually like meant, like from a well-being perspective, not actually thriving in that respect. So those are like the only types of people that I would say, like, yes, reduce the amount of exercise that you're doing. Like, no, you do not need to work out and do HIIT workouts 7 days a week, because it's not necessary. Reduce your workouts to like 3 or 4 times a week, and then walk every other day. Like, you don't need to stop exercise. And I hate that there are people out there who suggest that, because the amount of benefit that you get from exercising far outweighs pretty much anything else. And I don't think there should be anybody that should be afraid of exercising because of the stress that it puts on your body. We want the adaptation that comes with exercise. And the high cortisol levels that are spiked after exercise, yes, are going to happen, but we have to make sure that the other things around that, so like making sure you're eating enough food and making sure you're resting adequately and all of those things, are going to help support that, so it's not going to dysregulate anything. And again, like the likelihood of you dysregulating your cortisol with exercise is very, very low. There's very few people who have been able to do that, but that came with like other things that they were also doing in conjunction with over-exercising. So it's not something that you should be worried about, especially if you're new to exercise, and especially if you're not over-exercising or trying to do like multiple workouts every single day, which is not most people. So it's not something that needs to be worried about. So anyways, that being said, I've already gone in like 35 minutes of this going on about cortisol and different aspects of it. So hopefully all of that made sense. But now I did want to dive into cycle syncing, because I just feel like it kind of is really another topic that's based on hormones and like women and womanhood, that kind of goes into conjunction with other hormones that we've talked about. So what is cycle syncing? So if you've never heard of cycle syncing, it's this idea that we need to adapt our training and nutrition to our menstrual cycle. When we talk about menstrual cycle, I'm not talking about just when you're on your period. So your menstrual cycle is like the entire month. So usually it's like 28 to 35 days of your cycle. And there's two phases to your cycle. There's the follicular phase and then there's the luteal phase. So the follicular phase is the first half of your cycle, so the first like 1 to 16 days or so. And then the luteal phase is the last half, and that so like from day 17 to the day before your period starts. Within those two cycles. So within the follicular phase is when your menstrual cycle happens. Your menstrual cycle is the beginning, like marks the beginning of a new cycle. So day 1 of your period is day 1 of your cycle that is going to be for the next 28 to 35 days. Ovulation happens at the end of the follicular phase. So usually there's like a 5-day window, like kind of before and after the day you actually ovulate. So that's when like you're the most fertile. That's when you are at the higher, like that's when you're more likely to get pregnant if you're trying to conceive, things like that. So just like, yeah, that was just like the overarching like Cole's notes of what your cycle is. So the idea is with this exercise and nutrition to cycle syncing would be to consider what those phases kind of look like for most women and how do we adapt to them. So first week being your menstrual cycle, usually that's when they would suggest like more gentle exercises and yoga and walking and things like that. Your second week of your phase, usually your follicular phase, is when you feel your best. You're the most confident, you're the strongest, all of those things. So that's when they suggest doing things like more intense exercises, more strength training, more like pulling PRs and things like that. That's when you would do that. And then your luteal phase again would be like maybe doing some strength training, but like kind of going into more gentle exercises. And then the end of your luteal phase leading up to your period where you're feeling usually the most emotional, the most sensitive, things like that. You're going back to gentle exercises. The thing is, everybody is so freaking different when it comes to what their cycle looks like. I also think that everyone is a little bit different every single month when it comes to their cycles. And like we all have like our patterns, I think, but it's very loose. It's very loose as to what your cycle is going to look like month to month or year to year, from woman to woman. It's all so different. So this is that whole selling thing on, you need to cycle sync and do these things for yourself so that you're like listening to your body and honoring it and making sure, like fat loss is going to happen or whatever it is in order to like make it the most optimal, I guess you could say. But there's not a lot of evidence behind this, first of all, and it's not necessary. So, and I'm going to say that as like a hard and fast, like, no, it's not necessary. I think there's value in tracking your cycle, absolutely, and getting to know your body and getting to know yourself and understanding your symptoms and kind of what happens to you for the most part on a month-to-month cycle, on a month-to-month cycle. I think there's value in that. I think there's a lot of value and underrated value in kind of getting to know yourself because, like, we're adults. We think we know ourselves, but there are definitely things that we don't pay attention to when it comes to our bodies or our mannerisms or our behaviors or things like that. And those things change depending on different variables that affect us on a day-to-day basis. And that includes our cycle. So something that I do with my clients is I actually recently implemented this like a couple months ago, is that when they do their weekly check-in with me, we have a number of questions about their menstrual cycle. So like, where are you in your menstrual cycle and what kind of symptoms are you presenting with? And what I'm finding and what clients have even voiced to me is that like, wow, I'd never like realized this about myself during these cycles. They just kind of like randomly happen. I always thought they just, wow, sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. Or I always thought they just kind of randomly happened. When it wasn't quite that, it was more actually related to their cycle and what phase of their cycle they were in and how it was impacting them. So one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is things like insomnia. That's something that can be related to your cycle. I know for myself, I have months around my ovulation and around my period. Like at the later end of my luteal phase before my period comes, I often have trouble falling asleep. And it's same with my ovulation. And even with my ovulation days, I have times when like I feel super bloated and I feel super shitty because like it's about to happen. That ovulation is getting ready to happen. And not everybody experiences these things the same way, but that's just my own personal experience. And knowing that and taking that information and also understanding where I'm at in my cycle, it can also kind of prepare me for like what to expect. That being said though, that doesn't mean that I'm going to completely adjust the kind of training that I'm doing in order to accommodate my cycle. My cycle is going to be different on a day-to-day basis. So for me to take an entire week to do gentle exercises just in case I feel like shit doesn't make any sense. And that's also going to hold me back from a lot of different progress. It's going to hold me back from actually implementing progressive overload in order to build muscle and in order to build strength. So what if I feel really great that week? Like it depends on the person. Yes, I do think you should listen to your body. And if you're feeling super, super shitty, don't go for a PR. Go for gentle exercises or like reduce the amount of load that you're doing or like reduce the weights that you're using or anything like that. Still move your body because you're still going to get benefit from that unless you feel like really, really crappy. And then yes, take that day to rest or go for a gentle walk, whatever it has to be. But it doesn't need to be like weeks at a time and so black and white. It needs to be more of like a day-to-day decision based on how you feel and how you might be impacted by your cycle. So that's my take on it. Again, like you can look into the research around cycle syncing. There really isn't much. And then the research that is there actually says like it should be like a day-to-day thing, not like a week-to-week thing because everybody is so different. That being said, one thing that I did find interesting when I was looking into research on this was pertaining to nutrition. And I do think there is value in like just keeping tabs on your nutrition during your cycle and where you're at in your cycle and just kind of incorporating different things based on where you are. So for example, on your period, when we are losing blood and maybe you're not a big red meat eater or anything like that. So maybe you could find that you're a lot more fatigued. And that could be because during your period, you might be a little bit lower on iron levels. So would it be beneficial for you to maybe incorporate, steak or like other red meats into your diet during that week to just help supplement that, or taking an iron supplement during your menstrual cycle, something to that effect. So your nutrition can also be adapted to your cycle and where you're at in order to help with some symptoms. Taking melatonin during your menstrual cycle or during ovulation or wherever you're at that you might find that you have more trouble sleeping or whatever, like something to that effect, right? Like just being more cognizant of the behaviors that you're implementing that could also exacerbate those symptoms is something that can be really beneficial in order to adapt and allow yourself to like mitigate some of those things. And then, so there was another piece of research that I did read where, if I remember correctly, it was like two groups of women who were pursuing fat loss. And what they did was they had a macronutrient breakdown for all of these women that were it was all essentially the same, which for one, I don't really agree with because it should be catered to the individual. But one group had the exact same macros throughout their whole cycle. The other group had an adjustment period for their macronutrients during their menstrual cycle, during the menstrual phase of their cycle. So what they would do was that during their menstrual phase, I believe they increased fat and decreased decrease carbs during the menstrual cycle. I'd have to double check that. It's either they increase fats and decrease carbs, or they increase carbs and decrease fats. I forget which one it was, just during that time period of their menstrual cycle. And then it was the same for the rest of the cycle. And what they found was that with the group who had the adjustment during their menstrual cycle, there was just it wasn't significant, but there was a small increase in their ability to lose weight than the other group of women. So I found that interesting. I don't think it inherently had to do with the numbers itself or anything like that. But if we understand that during your menstrual cycle, you might have more cravings, you might be more tired, so therefore craving more carbs and things like that. You might be hungrier just because these are symptoms that come with your menstrual cycle. That adjustment in macronutrients likely allowed those women to sustain a calorie deficit, and more so than the women who did not have the adjustment. So I don't think it was inherently the macronutrient breakdown itself that caused them to lose more weight, but I think it was their ability to stay consistent and stay the course in that calorie deficit versus the other women who may have had more days of overeating or bringing themselves out of a calorie deficit, so it just took them longer, and during that same time frame didn't lose as much weight as the other group did. So again, context, right? So not just with marketing, but also with research. I also think that's another thing, that if you are somebody who likes to look into research, context is also very important. And looking at correlation versus causation, as I had kind of explained earlier in the episode too. So I do think that that's a benefit, is your ability to understand nutrition and adjusting it to your cycle can be really, really beneficial. I also think it's beneficial to adjust training to how you're feeling. So again, if you're feeling, and this should be not just for your cycle, but for anybody, if you're feeling like shit or feeling weaker or whatever it is, lower your weight so that you're not going to hurt yourself. It's kind of just common sense and practical to implement it that way, and then that way you're going to be able to sustain how consistent you're able to exercise throughout your entire life. So those are the two things that I think can take away from cycle syncing, is just kind of building an awareness around your body and how you're impacted by your cycle, so that you can then make adaptations and pivot however you need to in order to accommodate those considerations. So it's not about needing a black and white plan to outline your entire cycle. It's just that you need to get better about your awareness around your body and how you respond to things and how your body responds to your cycle, and have it as a consideration when it comes to nutrition and exercise. So that's something that we do at JL Fitness and Lifestyle in order to help women build that awareness, so that we understand how to pivot and and what kind of things we can kind of make adjustments at when they're feeling a certain way. So yeah, that was the bottom line. Bottom line is know thyself. And yeah. So anyways, I have been rambling on for, 47 minutes now. I'm going to wrap up here. I think my next episode I am going to dedicate to nutrition and macronutrients. So if you have any questions about anything specific to that, I had somebody asking me about, the benefits of macronutrients, how to count your macros. So I would be going into detail about proteins, fats, and carbs, what counting macros is, how you can calculate that, and all the benefits that come with that. So anyways, that's going to be on my next episode. Yeah. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment, and follow me at JL Fit Life. If you're listening to me on podcasts or on Spotify, please leave a 5-star review if you really enjoy this. I know it's only 2 episodes in, but we have lots of more information that we're going to be sharing in the coming weeks, which I'm really excited about. Okay, everybody. I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you next time.